Hi, and welcome to another Panthera live stream. My name is Phil Pertuta, social media and campaign lead here at Panthera, and we are actually halfway through our second annual global giving campaign, Wild at Heart. This yearly campaign aligns with Earth Day, and the theme for 2023 is Invest in Our Planet. We at Panthera believe that when we invest in cats, they invest in us and ecosystems. Throughout the campaign, we shared several stories about the wildcats we've researched and saved. There's Belize's F11.9, the jaguar, the United States' Nolan, the puma, and Senegal's Florence, the lion. Today, I'm honored to talk to three of the Panthera scientists who have firsthand experience with these cats. Panthera Belize Country Director, Dr. Bart Harmson, Senior Field Technician for the Puma Program, Andy Stratton, and Panthera Canada Country Director, Dr. Chris Everett. So let's just get started. Let me introduce our first guest, Dr. Bart Harmson. Hey, Bart, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, Phil?
I'm good. Lovely spring day here in New York. We're in the middle of our campaign, so it's we're excited to wrap up around Earth Day. So thank you for stopping by. Tell us a little bit about F11.9.
Well, F11.9 has a very boring name, but is high in importance and stature. We call her the old matriarch, giving her a little bit more recognition on that. And she's a female that we first detected in 2011, the F11 part.
Mm-hmm.
And we're now almost a decade further, and so she's a very old female.
Yeah.
And with that, we have a decade of information on her, in which we actually found out that she had many cubs over the year. And most importantly, she had many cubs that made it. And she's got quite a few daughters now who are actually now having cubs herself. And so she's rightfully called the old matriarch of the area. She's a grandmother, and she's still there. Now, one of the things that we've noted not too long ago is that a tourist filmed her, and she is actually getting quite old. Mm-hmm. She looks very arthritic in the way how she walks, and that's sad to see for us. But it's the natural process and the natural way that we see the fading out of this older female, and her legacy is now taken over by her daughters and the sons that have dispersed away. We've equally seen some of the sons moving away to the edges of our study area, and all of that is something that we've seen over this decade, and so her influence is quite visible within the area, and so we wanted to make sure we put some extra attention on her.
Of course. So, I mean, she has such an enduring legacy. How do you think that affects the area, the coxswain Basin?
It shows that the area is in a good state, because we need these females that actually raise cubs to adulthood, who can then raise cubs further to adulthood. Mm-hmm. And so she shows that this area is a very viable area, that it's a good place for jaguars, and that she is an example of what's needed to make jaguar conservation a success, because we can only create the conditions. It's now up to females like F11.9 to do it, because that's the part where we have no influence over it, and they have to do that part themselves, of course, and that's where the cats come in, having to do that. And she's done a wonderful job at that and showing that, so that's great.
So I mean, you've been tracking her for so long. What are the methods you've used to track her, and what was it like tracking her for years?
We've done it mainly with camera traps. Well, we've done it only with camera traps, video camera traps, and normal camera traps. So for us, different than in other projects where you put collars around them, which get very different information, much more detailed information, and the rest of your guests are going to talk about that. We very frequently had to wait for F11.9 to show herself, and sometimes it took a bit of time. And that leaves you a little bit more sort of, oh, she's still around. What's happening? And then suddenly the cubs come in, and you get very excited. So it's moments of glory and moments of waiting that it is for us. And so that's different from the continuous following that telemetry and color data will provide.
Oh, well, thank you, Bart. Thank you so much for all the work. Anything else you want to share about F11.9?
No, she will be in our hearts, and we'll make sure we'll look after her cubs and her legacy, and Coxcomb will remain a safe place, and we'll do that together with our main partner there, the Belize Audubon Society, and together with Belize and government. And we're very positive about that. And thank you very much for all your contributions. It's really great.
Oh, thank you. All right, our next guest is Andy Stratton, up in the northwest of the United States. He's a senior field technician for the Puma program. Andy, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Phil?
I'm good. I'm good. So you've studied Nolan the Puma. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah. So back in early 2020, we fitted him and his mother with a GPS collar. Just before he left to find his own territory. We followed him for a few months before they actually separated, and his mom kind of ditched out on him, and he didn't really know what to do. He just was like hanging around for a couple of weeks in one area, being like, where's mom? And once he realized that it was time for him to strike out on his own, he headed from where he was raised into this mosaic of highways, suburbs, patches of forest in the southern Puget Sound of Western Washington. And he spent a couple of months there kind of navigating through people's yards and eating deer and just trying to figure out where to go. And eventually he found his way all the way on the banks of the Puget Sound. And he had just made another kill. He got a deer for himself, and it seemed like the dogs that lived at the houses he was nearby had found him, and he got kind of spooked off of his meal and decided, instead of cutting back inland through all the highways, to swim. And he swam to an island out in the Puget Sound and spent a couple of weeks there before he was unfortunately shot, and his story ended. But the important part of Nolan in the legacy he leaves behind is the story of his journey, and that's what we're taking forward with us, and is going to help other cats.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've never heard of a puma swimming. You released a paper recently. Tell me more about the research that you did with swimming pumas.
So a coworker, Reed Barbie, and I took this swim, the distance of it, and extrapolated that to the rest of the islands in the Puget Sound to determine how many islands were reachable by pumas or cougars. And we found that it's a large chunk of them are swimmable for cougars. His swim was 1.1 kilometers, and that's just over half a mile. And once we realized this, we then looked at how many islands were reachable from hopping from an island that they had already swum to, and this even more. And so this means swimming could be a viable way for cougars to get from where they are born to new lands. And this can help everything from genetic diversity to just pumas finding their own place in the world instead of being constrained like we are at our study area here on the peninsula that is cut off from the mainland by Interstate 5 and the growth of Seattle and the surrounding area.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's an obstacle, stuff like that. Like the highway is definitely an obstacle for, cougars in the area. Why is it, do you think it's so important for genetic diversity within the puma population in Washington?
Well, some new research just came out from the state that clearly shows that pumas on the peninsula are genetically isolated from the pumas in the rest of the state. And we're still in the early stages. It's not like California quite yet, Southern California in the around LA, but we have an opportunity here as the growth of Seattle expands, and they're going to be redoing infrastructure to put in place things like over and underpasses. And the story of Nolan swimming and the other pumas we're studying can help illustrate why this is needed and where to build these crossing structures.
Yeah.
And just a few pumas crossing back and forth drastically increases genetic diversity within a population and can keep things stable. And while there are plenty of mountain lions or pumas, cougars on the Olympic Peninsula, we'll see over time that genetic diversity will fall, and this can be a problem in the long term.
Yeah. Oh, Andy, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add about Nolan?
No, just he was a cool cat, and he's been followed by many others, and we're excited to follow more stories of these really cool cats on the peninsula.
All right, Andy, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Next up, our last guest is Dr. Chris Everett. He is the Panthera Canada Country Director, and he's going to talk about Florence, the lion. Chris, how you doing? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry.
It's
How's
okay.
that? Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah, how you doing? How's tell us a little bit about Flo.
Yeah, okay. I'm doing good. Thanks. So Flo is not in Canada. She's a lion in Senegal in West Africa. So this is part of the Panthera's Senegal program that I help out with. And the lions in West. So I'll just quickly tell you a little bit about the lions in West Africa, because a lot of people know much about the West African lions. Mm-hmm. So there's two subspecies of lions in Africa, and there's the eastern southern ones, and then there's the northwest African lions. And the northwest African lions are endangered, and there's only a couple hundred left in existence. And this Florence, this Flo, this lion that I'll tell you about, is part of one of the most secure populations of these West African subspecies. And so it's a critical little population in a national park called Niokolo Kobo National Park in Senegal in West Africa. And so Flo is a female in her prime. She's probably right now about 6 years old. And she was the very first lion that we caught and GPS collared when we started doing a GPS collaring campaign in Niokolo Park. And so we caught her in 2021. When we caught her, she had a couple of subadult females nearby that were obviously her cubs, and so that was really cool to see. And we could that she's raised cubs already, and so it was really neat to see that. That here this female cubs is contributing to this population. And then I wanted her over the next couple of years. And at one point, I got up close to her during the day and saw that she was with these two females who are now about 2 years old and ready to, start their own reproductive lives. And then the GPS collar died, the battery dies, which they do after a little while. And so we lost track of her. And, because she was there's not that many lions. There's only about 40 lions in this park, and so we're very concerned, obviously, and trying to track her down and replace the collar. And so setting lots of cameras up, and this was just this year, in places, so setting cameras up in places where she'd been frequenting to try to track her down. And we got these video images of her just a few months ago and she looks great, and she's got 3 brand new little cubs that are just like 3 months old time, right? And so that actually and so at that point we just stopped the campaign of trying to catch her, because I didn't want to stress her out, when the babies are so little. I mean, we'll replace her collar next year when the babies are bigger. But thinking more about her and trying to figure her legacy out is, 3 cubs now with her, and then she had the 2 females of her last batch of cubs that are now adults. there was also a male with those ones that we've figured out was so she must have had 3 in the last litter as well, and he's often dispersed. And then we've also figured out that there's another 3 males that are a bit older that are probably also her offspring from before.
Yeah.
And so that brings it to like you know, a minimum of 6, maybe 9 cubs that she's produced, and like, yeah, I said the population's at 40, and so she has contributed about 15 to 20% to the population of lions, and so she's a pretty important, amazing lioness, and so that's yeah, so it's a really big deal to know her and track her and know that she's doing great out there.
So yeah, I mean, with the like reappearance of Flo, how hopeful do you feel about the reemergence of lions?
Yeah, it's great news. It's super news. I mean, so just a little bit more background. When Panthera first started in this park about 10 years ago, the first surveys produced about 15, an estimate of about 15 lions. Mm-hmm. And so in 10 years, it's gone from 15 lions to 40 lions. Mm-hmm. And like I said, 15 to 20% of that growth could be this one female. And kind of with, you know, Panthera is investing a lot of energy and into this park with in partnership with the government, and just increasing the population of wild ungulates there so that it can carry more and more lions, and Flo's offspring can move and find their own home ranges, their own territories, you know. So yeah, very hopeful. It's very much on an upward trajectory, and which is really neat. You know, it's really neat to see a national park in Africa really coming back to life like that, you know, and the lion population really growing again, you know. And yeah, and so it's like kind of like what Bart said. I mean, it's a partnership between, you know, the people that are working on and trying to improve the situation there, and then the lioness, you know, who's out there producing more and more cubs. So it's pretty neat.
It's such positive and good news. And Chris,
yeah,
thank you so much for
really is.
Work. Anything else you'd like to add about Flo?
Just that it's neat to think that right now she's out there with 3 little cubs behind her, and she's probably, you know, hunting, you know, or she's probably between a hunt right now, you know, feeding her cubs out on the land. Yeah.
Oh, that's great news. You know.
Well, we're chatting. She's out there. So.
All right, so I'm going to bring back all 3 of our guests right now for some questions and answers. If you do have any questions you want to ask our scientists, feel free to add that to as a comment or in, you know, below the social media post. So Bart, Andy, Chris, welcome back. We're all together. I do have a few questions from our audience, which is great. Question 1. Has long-term monitoring influenced your decision making? Bart, if you want to go first, and then Andy, then Chris.
Yes, it's the main reason why we're doing that, to sort of like not having to do it in a vacuum, absolutely not knowing anything about the cats. In many ways, it shows why a site that we have as Coxcomb is a stronghold for jaguars, where we absolutely have to make sure that this remains a source population. We have to keep the people who live around it happy to live next to these big cats, jaguars, and not feel threatened by them. And that works sort of okay, but it doesn't come without its challenges.
Of course.
And we have to prove continuously to everybody that the site is so important, because Belize is absolutely a country that has it's not a rich country, so it needs to constantly see where it will put its financial resources, and we therefore need to prove that this is a very valuable site and increase its tourism. We have to help with the tourism to bring revenue in. And during the days of when Alan Rabinowitz was working there, it was a mosquito infested logging camp with very little prospect. Mm-hmm. And now it is actually the beautiful site that's restored after 40 years that receives a lot of tourists, and it's the Jaguar Park.
Yeah.
And to have been part of that legacy, to change it from that to this, I feel very honored that I was part of that little chain of that, together with all the people in Belize. Of course, we're not the only one. We can only do this with people like the Belize Audubon, the government being behind this and everything like that. Being part of that chain is beautiful to see that we can do this for jaguars.
Andy, same question. How long has long-term monitoring influenced your decision making?
Well, monitoring individuals for over a long time, potentially their entire lives, gives us not just a snapshot into the lives of these animals, but gives us a narrative about an individual's life and how they interact with the world. And it can show us just how much an individual animal can matter in a population, or how their behaviors over life change. And having this full story, especially with youngsters, and how they're trying to permeate and navigate a new landscape from having a relatively sheltered life being taken care of, is really informative for the future of mountain lion management, or really mountain lion conservation across their range.
Chris, how does this apply to Flo?
I mean, and everything that Bart and Andy have said absolutely is applicable to West African lions as well. Yeah, I mean, we're monitoring them for very specific purposes. I mean, we from monitoring these animals and these individuals and populations, we're learning about what their critical needs are, so that we know how to ensure their viability. And then even specifically, I mean, for the Senegal project, for instance, the monitoring individual lions also helps direct limited, like what Bart had said, there's very limited resources in the world. We can't do everything all the time and protect everywhere, but by using the information that we've gained about what areas, for instance, are used by lions and important for lions, then we invest more resources into improving the protection of wildlife in those areas. And yeah, so I mean, monitoring it's very important. It informs everything we do, really.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question here. In light of your research on pumas in Washington, lions in Senegal, and jaguars in Belize, how do you foresee the future of each of these cats and their populations? So, Bart, if you want to go first.
I'm very positive about the jaguars in Coxcomb. I think we have a very strong partnership with people on the ground. It's solid management there. The immediate areas there seem to be, because of the solid economic base that it's based on, seems to be well founded. I'm more worried about the areas outside of that don't have that solid foundation yet. Jaguars need vast areas. They need to have this good connection that Andy talked about, that's necessary to keep that population going. And that is something where I hope we can transplant these models, make this something that's sort of like, look, this worked here, we can make this work over there as well, and create bigger models within the region to make these parts work. And with that, bring in the international support that's necessary to make this happen. And that's why the events what we're having here are so important, that you can actually go from a single cat to saving a region. And that's what we're hoping to do. It's all about using the one example, the one area, to the region, and expanding from that. That's what we're wanting to try and do here.
Andy?
I think that pumas or cougars in particular, we're in a great spot, and I think the future can be very bright. They're still a common animal, and have much of their range is still inhabited by them. And I think that what we need to focus on now is connectivity of populations and having this understanding that we live in the same world, and we've kind of divided it up unknowingly for a long time with things like highways and cities, and that going forward, to maintain healthy populations of not just mountain lions, but all big cats, which require a lot of space, is we need to factor them into how we build our infrastructure and just how we live on the landscape. This can be an umbrella for just how we interact with our world as a whole, using cats like mountain lions as a conduit.
That's positive news. Chris, as far as Flo is concerned, how do you see the future of lions in Senegal?
Yeah, it's a positive story right now. So like I said, it's an endangered subspecies, so it obviously has not been so positive, and the majority of their range is, I mean, probably, you know, much more than 90% of their range is gone within West Africa. The population is also down to, you know, a tiny fraction of what it would have been, I don't know, 100 years ago or 20 years ago even. And so we're coming from a very low point. But, you know, if we're talking specifically about this small population and, you know, of this subspecies, way up, and it's really neat. And so things are getting better. And there's a long way to go before you could say that it's a viable subpopulation, you know, or that it's secure from, you know, anthropogenic threats or anything. But at least it's on its way up. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean that's and that's exciting for everybody. It's exciting for the whole country. You know, it's exciting for all of West Africa, really. Yeah.
It's great for the ecosystem as well, you know.
Yeah.
Promoting biodiversity and all that. One last question. The theme of our campaign of Wild at Heart is when we invest in wild cats, they invest in us. So how can they help cats like Flo, Nolan, and F11-9? Just what can a person do who's watching this right now help? Bart, no answer for that. Even specifically to Belize, you know.
Yeah, I think the answer is probably very similar for every program that is there. I'm biased towards Belize. I've always worked there, and Belize is a great node and beacon of hope, I think, in the region over there. But it means that we need support for the programs to keep doing what we're doing. We can only scale up from a single cat to more cats that we save by having the funding to do that and the support that we have. The word coming out that this is good what we're doing. And I think that is the main part. It's just sort of like jumping on board financially and in terms of support for this, that this is a good thing to do, because it also needs to be remembered that a country like Belize that's actually pulling its weight to do this needs to be supported in that they're doing this, not only to sort of like, you're doing this bad, you're doing that bad, but no, they're doing something great in many parts. There's many things that go wrong in Belize, but this is where they do things right, and that needs to be promoted, helped, and financed. And that is where, and these cats are beautiful. Everybody will know that, and that's the thing where the cat gives back to us, because the tourism part is, believe me, it's beautiful jungle out there, but it's not the same without these cats. People don't come if there's not this enigmatic animal walking in it. They don't see a jaguar, but they're coming there because this animal is in there. And that's the part that will attract them. And knowing that they're in there is the big difference between it being magical or a mosquito-infested forest part that's there. And it's not only that, of course. I'm just making it very thick. Yeah. But that's the difference, I think, what it is.
Andy, how can we help the Puma program and the Cougars in Washington?
Well, and investing in following these cougars allows us to tell these stories and to see what these animals are doing on the landscape. These animals that are playing a key role in the ecosystems that they are in, that include us. And so taking care of them in turn takes care of us. And as we continue to live in this world and change and expand, take them into account. And we can't do that unless we have an understanding of them, unless we see their lives and what they need, and take those into account with our needs as well. So investing in mountain lions now means that when people are looking back on us in hundreds of years, they can see that they still have them in a world that has space for them because of what we're doing now.
Yeah, it's very true. Chris, how can we invest in Flow and the lions in Senegal?
I mean, it's the again, Bart and Andy have said it. You know, I mean, it's a combination of you know, if we're talking about how can people in America or in Europe, I mean, it's a combination of supporting, you know, the efforts that that Panthera and government partners in these countries are doing, and you know, and celebrating their existence. You can go as a tourist to, you know, Coxcomb or Neokolo, and you know, and promoting the, you know, the importance of them. It's and then on a wider, more holistic side, it's that just celebrating the intrinsic value of nature and keeping that in as part of your life and as part of how you live your life, and you know, the conversations you have with people, you know, and having it be placed high on the list of importance in life, you know, and that'll benefit Flow in Senegal, and indirect, you know, even if it's indirectly, it'll just benefit the whole world. It'll benefit nature, and, you know, and yeah, I mean, this is Earth Day. This is what it's about. It's and just keeping that as, yeah, keeping it high on the list of importance in life, you know, as high as it can be, you know, celebrate nature and love nature.
It is Earth Day, guys.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chris, Andy, Bart, for sharing your stories and, you know, being with us today. To our audience, you could donate to our Wild at Heart campaign to fund the research and protection of our of all the wildcats around the world. Your tax-deductible gift ensures Panthera can continue to share these great stories that we heard today for the future. Also, thanks to our friends at Tiltify, if you donate $500 or more through Twitch by clicking this little QR code over here, your donation will actually be matched. So feel free to you know, scan this QR code and, you know, donate. Remember that when we invest in wildcats, they invest in us. And if you want to participate more in our Wild at Heart campaign, we have a new game on our website where you take the role as a conservationist and save a cat named Sandy. So feel free to try that out. Be sure to follow us on social media for more updates on the campaign. Sign up for our monthly newsletter. And don't forget to share. Share our news, share our social posts and everything. Thank you, guys. And thank you, audience, for watching today, and remain wild at heart. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
Phil.